Yeah, we're live. We'll just wait for a few people to join in, and then
Sure.
we'll just, start off with it.
I'm trying to find it on your page here so I could share it too. Let me see. I thought every place was even hours ahead of time. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know that you could be 10 and a half hours ahead of us. That's very surprising to me. There we are. Let me turn the sound down. There
We
we
have
go.
few people joining us. All right, so we'll start now. So, hi, welcome everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Dog Spot Live series. Today we have with us a very special guest, Larry. I am pretty sure most of the people, especially people who are dog enthusiasts, and especially all the trainers, they must be very well familiar with who he is. In terms of his contribution to the training industry, to the dogs, the kind of work he does. So he is basically a federal agent, and he has been training dogs from the past a couple of years. And what actually got him into professionally into the training industry was his natural ability of training dogs, handling dogs, understanding them. And that's what made a lot of people approach him with their dog related problems. And that's when he finally decided to get into training full time. And without wasting much of your time, I would just hand it directly to Larry so that he'd be able to do the right justice to his introduction. So Larry, over to you. If you could just briefly give your introduction in terms of how it all started off for you, and how you got into dog training world professionally.
Sure. First of all, good morning. Here it's early. Good
Yeah,
afternoon to
good.
you guys, and thanks for having me on. I'm very honored, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to so many people out there in India. India has been a very big supporter of mine, and so I truly appreciate the Indian people. Um, as you said, I'm a special agent with Department of Homeland Security. I've been for almost 25 years. I retire in 3 more months after 25 years,
Oh,
and
wow.
I've been training dogs about the same amount of time too. And the way it started was really like a lot of people got started in the pet dog industry.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my wife got our first dog on our own when we first got married, and I had started my career, and we were down on the Mexican border, and I got a little puppy from a buddy of mine down there, and
Okay.
we did everything wrong. We didn't have kids. That was our baby. And we
Right.
completely destroyed this dog. We just loved on him and gave him what he wanted, and we ruined him. He really struggled with separation anxiety. We couldn't leave the room without him screaming. He destroyed my house. We didn't know what we were doing. And
Right.
so we got with a trainer,
Mm-hmm.
and we started training,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so blown away by the behavior of the trainer's dog, and instantly that's what I gravitated to. Even though I had already been working with canine units in the Border Patrol, like some of the agents I was working with, the first senior agent I worked with was a canine handler. That part didn't just interest me that much. I didn't even know what a
Right.
Malinois was at the time. And that was the
Right.
first time
Right.
I ever saw a Malinois. But
Right.
when I saw the behavior of this trainer's dog, that's what interested me. And I became obsessed with learning how to create that well-behaved dog,
Right.
and to make a long story short, it just took off from there. And that
All
part
right.
of that part of dog training just came fairly easy to me. And I just started soaking up as much knowledge as I could. And
Right.
I trained dogs for free for a long time. I trained a lot of dogs for free because that's, in my opinion, the best way to learn. You could read and
That's
you could
true.
watch videos and you could take in as much knowledge as you can, but until you get to put your hands on a lot of dogs, that's
Mhm.
where the real learning takes place.
That's true. It completely actually makes sense. That's actually pretty much true. And it's kind of, similar to how I also professionally started off with my training journey. Obviously, there's no comparison, you training from the past almost, as you said, 15, 20 years at least, versus, let's say, me. being professionally training from the past over just 4 years, but obviously I can completely relate to what you said. So as today we'd be, as our topic is resource guarding, we'd be discussing much more about it in terms of how what resource guarding is, how do dogs develop it, whether it's genetic, or does it develop over time. So again, without wasting much of time, we'd be starting off with our very first topic, which is like, if you could explain to the audience what resource guarding exactly is, like what resource guarding is in dogs.
Oh, that's when you gave me this subject that we were going to be talking about, I was like, oh man, because it can be a really difficult subject, but at the same
Right.
time, it's something that so many people struggle with,
True, that's true.
and
Yeah, that's
and
true.
so when most people think of resource guarding, they think of a dog being aggressive over a desirable possession, usually food, sometimes toys. But I think where it's overlooked, and a lot of times I think where it's developed,
Mm-hmm.
is the way the dogs use space and guard
Right.
people. One of the
Right.
things I hear most in the pet dog world is when I show up to work with a new dog, I always hear people say, "Oh, the dog gets aggressive around the owner when people come around, and it's he's
Right.
just protecting me." And I
Right.
have to explain to them that dog's has no protection capabilities in its life. It's not protecting
Right.
you, it's possessing you. There's a big
Right.
difference. And to that dog, you're nothing, but a big meaty bone.
Right.
And you asked a very difficult question, and that's, is it genetic? Can it be genetic? And the truth is, I don't know. I don't know if it's genetics are extremely strong. Okay, we can't go against that. The genetics of a dog is there. Can it be
Right.
genetic? Of course, anything can be. Is it usually genetic? I don't believe so. You know,
Right.
and I think breeders would have a lot more knowledge of that, because I don't see puppies at 2 weeks old and 3 weeks old and 4 weeks old. You know what I mean? I see
Right.
puppies at 7 weeks old and 8 weeks old. And I
Right.
could tell you from my experience, I have seen plenty of 7 and 8 week old puppies that are already exhibiting the behavior. Is it genetic? I don't know. Was it developed within its siblings and its pack? Often it is. Often it is. I've had a lot of success dealing with this subject, but one of my own dogs, one of my best
Mm-hmm.
known dogs, Bruno, my Rottweiler, he struggled immensely with resource guarding over his food. And
Okay.
and I struggled with this. I had helped so many dogs with this issue up until this point, but I still couldn't fix my own dog. Now, when I say he struggled with his food, when he would eat extremely fast, faster than any dog I've ever seen.
Okay.
I had tried everything I knew what to do, everything from punishment to calling him away to, just counter conditioning, you name it, I did it with him and nothing helped. Now, with that being said, when you got close to him, he'd eat faster and start growling and start shaking. And if you went near the bowl, he would turn his body to keep you away. He would never go after you. A stranger
Okay.
could put their hand in his bowl, he wouldn't bite you. Okay.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, even though it looked extremely aggressive, the more and more I dealt with it, I started realizing that this dog can't help where his mindset is right now. This is completely involuntary.
Right.
And I started thinking to myself, like, is it a possibility that I have to stop addressing this and maybe stop ignoring this behavior? And I almost was embarrassed thinking that to myself. But then I was having a conversation with Michael Ellis years ago, and I asked him, I said, Michael, I got to ask you something. And I explained what I was dealing with. And I said, you might think I'm crazy, but I almost have a feeling that I need to ignore this behavior and stop addressing it. And he agreed. He said, yeah, absolutely. He said, because, and this is something that I already believed with other dogs. I just wasn't using it in my dog. He said,
Right.
you can't punish a dog for feeling the way he does. You can't punish his mindset. And that is true. You can't. And I knew this, but I was so
Right.
frustrated with my own dog. And you know what? As soon as I backed off and started ignoring that behavior, it never went completely away, but it probably went 85% away, where the dog was
Right.
able to relax a lot more. But what happened with Bruno was he was, oh, sorry, he was,
No problem.
he was
Yeah.
one of 13 puppies. His mama had 13 puppies. Okay.
Okay.
Was he born like that? I don't think he came out of his mama like that. But what had happened was she couldn't feed all 13 puppies. The puppies
Okay.
sucked her dry, and the owners had to take the puppies off the mama way too soon because she was just skin and bones by the time I saw his mother when he was 7 weeks old.
All right.
And I think from day one, it was a fight for him to eat. He really
Right.
struggled. And so
Right.
it was ingrained in him from day one that this food can go away at any time, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
was it genetic with him? No, but it was something that he learned from the day he was born, if that makes sense. Okay.
Right. All right. All right.
And that's just one
But
example.
right. But have you, like, ever since you've been training dogs, have you ever come across a dog you feel that, that certain puppy or dog basically has genetic, resource guarding, or do you feel that it's more or less, created, I won't say created, but developed over time, either due to the surroundings, as mentioned, because of being one of the puppies in the litter, and the environment the pup was living in,
Sure.
and again the various circumstances and all, or probably let's say a puppy or a dog who's living in a household with, let's say, certainly inexperienced pet owners who do not really know how to read the dog's body language to understand and work further towards it. So, like, have you had these two separate sort of experiences while working with dogs over the past few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think,
Okay.
and like I said, I'm not saying it's never genetic. It definitely can be.
Right.
I think when it is genetic, though, it's not just that issue that's genetic. I
Right.
think there's a lot
Right.
of other issues that the
Obviously.
dog is
Yes.
genetically
True.
predisposed to, right? I
True.
think
Yeah.
almost always, it's created by the owners inside the
True.
home.
True.
And the little things that people overlook is the dog starts doing things at an early age that
Correct.
sets the dog up for these issues, and
Right.
things that are ignored. I
Right.
talk about how dogs use space a lot, okay,
Right. Right.
and the abuse and disrespect of space in young dogs, I think, leads to a lot of other issues. For example, people allow puppies to do things that they would never want their dog to do, okay. And
Right.
so what I try to explain to people is you're not raising a puppy, you're raising a dog. All
True.
right. So when
Yeah.
you allow a lot of unruly behaviors, and when you reward a lot of unruly behaviors accidentally, you don't think about it as puppies, that just develops into more issues. I've, for example, I went to see a potential client once, young dog, okay, young dog. And the client was sitting on the stairs in his foyer, the beginning of his house, and
Right.
he was holding his like 5-year-old daughter, like was sitting on his lap.
Right.
And he had, I think it was a Labrador, if I remember correctly. And I remember that lab coming over and nudging the little girl out of the way, and so she could be with the owner. And right away, the owner let it happen and started petting the dog. And
All right.
I said, you got to stop that. He's like, what do you mean? He said, she's just, she's jealous. I said, no, she's not jealous. That's really dangerous behavior. And what she's doing is claiming you just as a resource. You're no different as a meaty bone, a toy, or a bowl of food. And
True.
you rewarded that behavior and completely dominated your daughter away from her. And they didn't want to hear it. Well, I didn't work with them because they weren't interested in changing things.
Right.
Within the next 6 months, that same dog that was very happy-go-lucky, no issues, wound up biting 3 different children, and serious bites. Okay.
All right.
So when we think of resource guarding, we think of a dog standing over a bowl of food or a bone or a toy. That right there is how a lot of this starts. Okay. That
Right.
dog came in and completely disrespected that owner's space, the child's space. Okay.
Right.
And
Right.
then claimed its possession. In this case, hey, yours, it's the owner, it's the person. Okay.
Right.
So people usually go one of two routes. Oh, the dog's very jealous, or the dog is protecting me. And neither one
Right.
is true. That dog is
True.
being very rude, very disrespectful, and it's claiming that space. And the one example I use quite a bit is when my little boy was 2 years old. We had Rottweilers and German Shepherds, big, powerful dogs, right?
Right.
And
Right.
my children knew from the day they can walk, if one of those dogs is laying in the doorway to the kitchen and my little boy wanted to walk into the kitchen, he wasn't allowed to step over the dog. Okay. He'd have to tell the
Okay.
dog to move, and the dog has to get up and give up that space. He has
Right.
to be able to walk through the dog without stepping over him. Because the
Right.
second that child starts stepping over the dog, now that space is owned by the dog. That
Right.
child will never have the respect of the animal. And that's why, from a very young age, both my kids, my son and my daughter, can control big, powerful dogs off leash. It's because of those little things with the behavior that we focus on. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much. It actually does. It's a very, slight point, I think, which most of the people, I think, including, I would include myself also, a lot of trainers also would fail to probably, at times implement, thinking that, at the end of the day, that's our pet. We know that there's a certain level of understanding and the pet will not really do anything. But the point that you mentioned actually makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, no matter how much the dog loves us, or we think probably that the dog, is really fond of us and respects the, dog human relationship, owner, pet sort of a relationship. But we also need to understand that we have to respect the dog's boundaries. We have to understand how it works as per the dog psychology, to be able to, make the most out of the relation and to avoid all of these, possible, basically, negative experiences that can occur eventually with time. But also, apart from the couple of pointers that you just listed, just a while back, if you could also, just share with us slight more, couple of more pointers for general pet owners, to be able to understand, let's say if someone is having a pet, either a puppy or a young dog, or let's say 2 3 year old dog, if at all someone is having a pet, how can they make out, like, if some sort of, through body language or some sort of, signs that the dog can give, which the owners can read at an early stage, to eventually see that the dog is slightly developing guarding sort of instincts, and how to, really be able to make out through the dog's body language, so that they can stop what they're doing right there and then can start working towards it accordingly.
Sure. First, I think it's a very obvious point, but a lot of point that a lot of new dog owners ignore. And that's if you have a puppy, okay, or a dog, let's say you adopt a dog, puppy or dog, doesn't matter, and you start providing it with something to chew on or a toy or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people look for the obvious, the growling, the aggression, but it doesn't always look like that. It could be very
Right.
subtle, as to where
Right.
if a dog has something that's high value to it, it could be a
Mm-hmm.
person, it could be food, it could be a toy, anything. It could be a piece of furniture. We see that
Right.
often, right? Dogs are
Right.
allowed
Right.
on the furniture, and all of a sudden
Right.
that becomes its
Yeah,
favorite
that's true.
possession.
That's
And
true.
then when someone is approaching, it may be very subtle, to where the dog is just laying there, breathing normally, mouth is open, and then all of a sudden, when that person gets past that certain distance that creates that stress in the dog will just stop breathing, or you'll see the look out the side of its eyes,
Right.
and all
Right.
these little moves are telling you now the dog is under stress,
Right.
and you have to pay attention to that. For
Right.
one, I think too many owners that are aware of resource guarding,
Mm-hmm.
they create it accidentally by trying to avoid it. By what do I mean by that? Because of TV shows and the internet and YouTube, I
Yeah.
see a ton of people, they start feeding their dog as a puppy. And then as the dog is eating, they're petting the dog, they're putting their hand in the food, they're messing with the
Yeah.
dog. And I'll
Right.
say, why are you doing that? And, oh, I just want him to learn how to accept us so he doesn't become aggressive. Well, I think 9 out of 10 times you're going to create that resource
Aggressive
guarding.
dog. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So with me, I put the food down. I let my dogs eat. I don't bother them,
Right.
and I
Right.
just don't have that issue, but I don't create it. But they also don't have toys laying all around. Toys are
Right.
very important in my training. Play is a huge part of training. That stuff comes out when we're going to play and interact. So they only have meaning if they're with me. You understand what I'm saying? And
Yes. Right.
I think the biggest thing is to people wait before they implement any kind of obedience in their dog. So with my
Right.
puppies, I teach the out command very
Mm-hmm.
quickly, and I teach the leave it command. The out command means anything you have in your mouth, I need you to drop. I need you to release.
Right.
It's pretty much the first thing I teach. And I
Right.
also teach the leave it command. If I don't want you to touch something, don't touch it. Okay. I teach a release command, meaning free dog, go do whatever you want from day
Right.
one. And I also teach a reward marker. So these are four
Right.
things that my puppies know very, very quick. Because
All
when
right.
you have some kind of communication system based there from the start, you can provide information for the dog very
True.
clearly. And
True.
so when the puppy shows some kind of an issue that maybe you don't like or that can grow, you have to address it early. People don't want to do anything to show puppies or correct puppies. And then when the dog gets a little older, the first time they address it, the dog either falls apart or lashes back out of, in a full blown aggressive kind of state. And they say, whoa, we never saw this side of the dog. Oh, you
Right.
did. You did. You just weren't paying attention.
Overlook.
You
Right.
know what I mean? And
Right.
so the
Yeah.
first time, a lot of people know my female Malinois, Mango. She's a 2-year-old dog. I
Okay.
showed people the first time I ever corrected her. I only had her for, I don't know, a day or two, 3 days. It was the first week I believe I had her. She was 7 or 8 weeks old. There was a dead bird in the road. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
She ran up to the dead bird and put her face in the bird. And I told her, Mango, leave it. And I pushed her away. She jumped right back into it. I said, Mango, leave it. And I pushed her away. She don't know leave it yet. I'm trying to start teaching her now. When she
Right.
did it the third time in a very defiant way, I said, leave it. And then I took the scruff of her neck and I gave her a little pinch. And she said, ew. She let out a little squeak. She never
Right.
went by the bird again. And she
Right.
learned what leave it was very quickly because I told her to leave it that third time. I gave her a chance. And that third
Right.
time, after she didn't, there was a little bit of discomfort applied.
Right. Right.
She didn't break down. She didn't fold. She wasn't sad. She wasn't physically hurt or nothing. But I made that message very clear to her. When I tell you not to touch something, you can't touch it. And she also learned how to out whatever she had in her mouth very quickly. Okay. So it's important that you have that communication system set up for the dogs and people. The average dog owner just don't do that. They don't
Right.
have a way to communicate with their dogs. They talk to them like they're people. No, and they use their name as a command. Mango, 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 mango. No, mango, no. The dog thinks its name is no after a while. You understand?
Right, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's there. That's true. We have Cat who's saying, for the example that you gave about stepping over the dog. She's saying it's something I had never thought of. As I mentioned
Sure.
for mentioning it, it's a small thing, but as you described, can have a big and long-lasting impact, and it's so simple. So obviously, the details that you're talking about in terms of how we should understand what the dog again what goes on into the dog's mind and
Right.
how they react, and especially the importance of owner being a part of the training, and being able to understand of how and what they need to do in order to raise a right and a balanced sort of a dog, so that eventually once the dog is a year and a half, 2 years of age, once the dog has grown into an adult, it's exactly the same kind of dog that they would want, the ideal dog basically that they would want to have. So moving on to continuing the a series of questions. Now that we've spoken about what resource guarding is, how do dogs develop it, whether it's genetic or whether it's developed over time, you've already through your explanations and the examples that you're giving, you've already listed out few of the pointers that can help to somewhat control, I won't say completely stop, but obviously with it actually differs from dog to dog, but how to control resource guarding in dogs. But if you could just, in a series, if you've to, let's say, suggest it to a general pet parent in a series on how, let's say, if a dog has developed and is in the initial stage, that he's now started showing signs like growling or snapping and even, let's say, biting the humans, how from, let's say, step 1 to, let's say, step 3, 4, 5, how would you put it in terms of how the owner should, let's say I'm a pet owner, how should I go about it? How do I make sure that I either decrease it or control it or completely fix the issue in the dog? Obviously it's going to take some time depending upon how long the dog has been displaying those mild to prominent sort of behaviors. But how do you tackle it? If you could, series wise, if you could just suggest that out as well.
Sure. Like any other unwanted behavior, okay? If someone sends me a dog for a board and train and it has, say, an unwanted behavior, whether it's aggression or fear or chasing cars or resource guarding, doesn't matter. First, I don't put the dog in that situation. Okay. In other words, I'm not going to put the dog in the situation that the problem is and then try to fix it that way. You're chasing from behind at that point. So in this case, if the dog, guards toys, guards foods, guards people, guards furniture, anything, I'm going to do everything I can not allow the dog to get to that point. Okay. I'm going to limit the dog's freedom, and I'm going to up the communication system and the training with the dog from day one. Everything is going to be given on a need basis. Everything the dog needs will come from me. All right. So I'm not going to give it the opportunity, and we're going to up the obedience training very much. So there is a very strong communication system there. But, when we talk about the use of space, and that person who said stepping over the dog, you said it's a small thing to us. It's a huge thing to the dog. All right. So I talked about the dog coming into our space and being disrespectful. Well, another thing I see very common with pet owners is the dog is on a leash and the dog is always wandering, nose to the ground, moving out, no respect for the person's command through the leash. So not only are you allowed to come in and be disrespectful to my space, you're not allowed to leave my space unless I allow you to. So when you're with me, you're with me until I say you no longer have to be. Okay. So if I have a dog, that's the first thing. Very basic, usually more basic than people even think. Because when people think of something very basic, they go right to basic obedience and they start working on sit down, come. And that's fine. That's going to be part of it. But you have to address the things the way the dog sees things. And in reality, the dog don't care too much about, how we see science or training or basic obedience. So we have to help the dog. But another thing that I do quite a bit is, for one, I'm going to use a leash on the dog if the issue is feeding time. Okay. If the issue is toys, the dog don't need toys. We're only going to use them when we have to for training or play. Right. But the dog has to eat. He has to eat. And so if the dog has to eat, we got to feed the dog. The dog isn't going to eat without a leash on. He's going to have a long line on. All right. Because if I have to remove that dog, certain dogs I will go to and use spatial pressure to back it away from the food. But if it's already so severe, sometimes you can't do that. And that creates more friction and more conflict than anything. So that leash comes in handy to remove the dog. But another thing that I'm really big on doing, and not everyone agrees with this, and a lot of people think it's silly or it's false, but I've seen tremendous benefits, not just with resource guarding, but aggression and fear and everything else, is I like to use a clicker. I teach the clicker to the dog. I charge the clicker very strong, but then I like to mark and reward unwanted mindset behaviors in the dog. Okay. This is where you'll have people going, what the hell is he talking about? I'm going to explain to you. And I've done it in front of people for aggression at seminars and stuff, and they're kind of blown away. So let's say you have a dog that once a person comes close enough to the food, they start stressing, and that's where you see the bad behaviors. Okay. You can't punish a mindset out of the dog. If the dog can't help the way it's feeling, if it's a true struggle in the dog's head, you can't punish that out of a dog. Okay. And you can't kind of reward that out of a dog either, in a way. But let me explain. I'll make sure the dog is well versed with the clicker. And I always use a clicker, even though I use mostly verbal commands, verbal markers. For this kind of stuff, I like clickers. And so what I'll do is, if I know that as I approach a dog, the stress begins, the second I see that dog enter a stressful situation, I will click, and that usually creates a response to the dog, takes his mind off the stress to come get the reward. Okay, let me go a little further so people aren't confused. Years ago, I used to talk a lot how e-collars and proper e-collar training was so beneficial for fearful dogs, right? Like extremely beneficial. Like all these dogs I was training that were extremely scared of the world and shut down. When I started doing the e-collar conditioning, I saw a tremendous change in the dog's confidence. I couldn't understand why. I didn't know why. I didn't know how to explain it. The only thing I knew is that when the dog started feeling that low-level stimulation, it was completely foreign to the dog. It created a confusion, okay? And for that split second, when the dog was confused, it could no longer be scared of what it was scared of. The fear would stop.
Right.
And of course, we start marking and rewarding the dog's response when we start. Hey, where'd you go? Uh-oh. Are you there? Did you leave me? Are we still? Uh-oh. I'm here, right? But we lost her? Oh, no. Come back. All right, you guys could still hear me, I'm assuming. Oh, no. See, I'm always on the other end where I bring people back. I don't know. Hope they can get me back in here. We were just on a flow. Okay, so you guys could hear me. Are we going to be able to get her back on? Okay, I'm still good. Okay, so I'm going to continue to talk, and hopefully she jumps back on here. I don't know what the right thing to do is, because like I said, I'm usually the one that sends the link to someone, and then, I bring them on, but they brought me onto DogSpot, so I'm not sure what to do there. Okay. All right, so we're going to continue to talk about that. And I hope I'm doing the right thing. I'm so sorry if I'm not. So what I noticed, there you are.
I'm so sorry. There was, I think, some network issue. I got disconnected for a bit. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're okay. You're okay.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
I was saying, what I noticed was the people when the dogs would start conditioning to the e-collar, they couldn't focus on the strange stimulation, the foreign stimulation that they've never felt, and be scared at the same time. So I saw tremendous benefits in the dog's demeanor and attitude, and it became very secure, right? And for years, I couldn't understand why until I did it longer and longer and started understanding the dogs better. And when we provided that little bit of confusion in the dog's world, it took the dog's mind away from that imaginary stress that it really had nothing to fear, but it did. So later on, I kind of went a little deeper with that, and I was doing it with aggression cases. So
All
with the aggression cases, I would use, if the dog was aggressive towards people or dogs, that's what I would use. And I would charge the dog to the clicker very strong to where it really understood the clicker, right?
right.
And then the second, we would bring in the stressor, whether it be a person or a dog, whatever the dog was aggressive towards. This, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't wait till the dog blew up. The trick is to wait till the mind turns and the stress comes. And then what would happen is when I'd allow the dog to get to that stressful point in its head,
Mm-hmm.
I would click. And when the dog would hear the click, it knows what it means. It would
Mm-hmm.
focus its attention, even though at first it might be like, why did he just click? But I'm going to go get my reward. Okay. And we would
Mm-hmm.
start doing that. So when I started doing that as seminars, people would say, wait a second, aren't you rewarding the unwanted behavior? And I would say, kind of, but pay attention. I just want you guys to watch. And so every time the dog would get stressful over something, and it could be the resource, I would click the dog's mindset and the dog would learn to get the reward. And what we found happening very quickly, that the dog would start self-rewarding, meaning after several repetitions, when something would approach that would normally put the dog in a bad state of mind, the
Mm-hmm.
second the
Mm-hmm.
mind would start going to a bad place, the dog would look for the reward. And we saw the
All right.
behaviors changing very, very fast, very fast. A lot of
Right.
people, a lot of people discount that and they say that's full of crap. There's no way. But we showed them. We showed them in real time with real dogs with real issues. And it's the same
Right.
thing. That's one of the things that's also beneficial with resource guarding. I say
Right.
one of the things because I don't only do one thing when I'm fixing a
Obviously.
behavioral problem.
Obviously.
Okay.
Right.
I do
Right.
many things. But if the dog's head is down in a bowl and someone's
Mm-hmm.
approaching and all of a sudden the attitude changes to where the stress
Mm-hmm.
starts coming on and the dog
Mm-hmm.
hears the click, the dog
Mm-hmm.
immediately takes its mind from a bad place to a different place. Come get the reward. It does amazing things. It does absolutely amazing things, but we do that on top of giving the dog space, giving the dog structure away from the resource guarding. Okay. That's the biggest
Right.
thing. There is
Right.
no getting away from the bad habits and the good habits that you implement on how you live with the dog. That's 80, if not 90% of all the behavioral problems we have can be fixed by changing your lifestyle with the dog.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. Correct. Correct. So we have, Cat again saying it's being able to recognize the very subtle change in the dog's body language to avoid getting to the elevated state of stress. I suppose you're doing a remote pinch on the scruff of the neck.
I don't understand that. I suppose you're doing a remote pinch on the scruff of the neck. It's being able to recognize. No, because it's not a pinch. There's nothing negative being, there's no positive punishment being
All right.
implemented. And I
Right.
don't get into definitions and terms because that gets confusing for people. You know what I mean?
Right.
I
Right.
am literally rewarding the unwanted state of mind to get a different response from the dog. And it works extremely effective. Like it really, really does. It goes against everything that you're told in dog training, but if it works, it works. And it hasn't worked one time or two times. It's worked with tons of dogs with real serious issues. Okay.
Right.
Because
Right.
what a lot of people want to do right away, let's face it, they want to jump straight to punishment, punish the unwanted behavior.
Right.
That's not always going to work. And in
Right.
fact, personally, I very rarely jump into punishing the unwanted behavior. I just it's there's certain things that will work very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but punishing a voluntary behavior on a dog's part can be very effective. If the dog knows it's doing what it's doing, you can
Right.
punish that. Like the bird with my puppy. Okay, that's a perfect
Right.
example.
Right.
If the
Right.
dog is digging a hole, these are things the dogs can't control. But if you have a
Right.
dog that's very scared, insecure, fearful, or aggressive, and
Right.
it can't help that, you can't punish that out of a dog. Does that make sense?
Right. Right, that's true. That's true. And so although our topic for today is resource guarding, but the kind of approach you have and the way you're explaining to the people, and I read it over your website also, that you also focus on not just training the dog, but also guiding the dog owner, dog handler on how to really, train the dog on their own, so that once the training stops, or once the trainer stops coming in, helping the dog with the training and everything, they should be able to, as because at the end of the day, it's the owners who are going to stay with the dogs throughout their life. So they should be able to read and understand and train, even after, let's say, 2 months or 6 months or 8 months down the line, they're facing some new issue being popped up, minor issue, but they should be able to fix it. So in to just sum it all up, if you could just, with all the, again, viewers, if you could just share few pointers in terms of how the structure should work if someone is getting home a new puppy, on how they should, obviously, as you correctly mentioned, I think twice you mentioned that, we should focus less on giving corrections to the dog, because that means we've already waited for the dog to reach to that level, and
Sure.
then we're, working, which obviously makes our job also double, in terms of then trying to make sure that we're making the dog unlearn first all of those behaviors, and then in place of that, we're making them learn new behaviors that we want them to. So just to, simplify it a bit, if you could, with, the kind of knowledge you have and the kind of experience you've had, if you could just give a very basic sort of structure that you feel would be implemented more or less on every dog. Obviously, there's going to be, little bit amount of change in terms of the kind of dog, someone is keeping, in terms of the breed, the size, the kind of temperament the dog has. Obviously, structure would change, but just a brief, let's say, general sort of a structure that you would suggest all pet owners to follow.
Sure. For one, you could be the best dog trainer on the planet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
Right.
matter how good you are. You are
Right.
only as good as your clients.
Right.
Okay. And your clients are only as good as you teach them to be. That's
Right.
everything. That's it.
Right.
The dog is going to change for us, as they should. We're dog trainers.
Right.
There's nothing
Right.
impressive about changing a dog when it's in our
Right.
care. Okay.
Right.
Where
Right.
the real magic happens is how we can pass that knowledge to the dog owner.
Right.
And that knowledge that we pass to the dog owner has to be done in a way where it is simple and can be realistically implemented on a daily basis. If it's
Right.
not easy and realistic, then owners will not continue. They won't do it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the
Right.
first thing I focus on with the owners is just like the first thing I focus on with the dogs. How do we live with the dog properly? Where are your bad habits? What are the bad habits you're doing that are creating these behaviors? Okay, let's eliminate the bad habits and let's implement good habits now. Most people give puppies way too much freedom, way too much
Right.
freedom. And when
Right.
you give a puppy or a young dog or an untrained dog, doesn't have to be a puppy. When you give an untrained dog too much freedom, they are going to get in trouble every single time. They're going to
Right.
do things that you don't want. And then instead of developing the dog you want, you spend your time fixing unwanted behaviors. All right.
Right.
So
Right.
when people call me with a puppy, I don't take puppies in for training. Okay.
Right.
If
Right.
someone calls me with a puppy, what I'll do very often, if they're local to me, I'll say, bring me the puppy, come with it. I spend an hour or two with them, showing them how to teach the puppy. And
Right.
then I send everybody, and I've sent this video all over the world. I did a very simple video, 20 something minutes long, on what to do when you bring your new puppy home. Very
All
simple
right.
things, because
All right.
these are simple, basic things that dog trainers take for granted. You know, they come
Right.
natural to us, but the average dog owner doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what to
Right.
do. Okay.
Right.
So we start them off right by limiting the freedom and giving freedom as puppies can handle it or dogs can handle it. When I say dogs, a lot of people adopt dogs that aren't puppies anymore, but they have no training. Okay.
Right.
You
Right.
have to take a 3-year-old dog that you just rescued out of a shelter that has no training, and it has to be raised like a puppy. Okay. So crate management is very important. All right.
Right.
I have
True.
a very strong rule of thumb that I learned from the first trainer I ever started working with. My puppies sleep in their crate until they're 1 year old at night, no matter how well trained they are. No matter what, they sleep in their
Okay.
crate till they're 1 year old. They're
Okay.
not left loose in the house
Right.
when we are not home until they're at least 2 years old. That's about the age where most dogs are mature enough. And
Correct.
if you did your work properly in the early months, the dog can handle being left home alone. So I have very high drive Belgian Malinois, right? Everyone thinks that you can't live with these dogs. They can't be loose. My dogs are loose in my house. Once they hit 2 years old, I could leave them loose in the house. They're not going to do anything. But I've
Okay.
prepared them to handle that responsibility. I
Right.
taught them along the way. I didn't allow my 8-week-old Malinois to run around the house loose without us having control of them, because if I did that, they're going to learn a lot of really bad behaviors.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if you want to fix or avoid the resource guarding, develop a system to where not only does the dog understand your communication to it, but you limit the access of the dog to make mistakes. You
Okay.
develop the behaviors you want instead of fixing the behaviors you don't want. And it's really that simple, that
Right.
basic. Don't mess with
Right.
your dog's food when you feed it. Don't have
Right.
bones laying all over the house and toys laying over the house. The dog has to look to you. They're like, everything good in its life comes from you. They have to think you're
Right.
the greatest thing in the world, you know? If
Right.
I take in a client's dog that doesn't like people and is aggressive and wants nothing to do with me when it gets here, I don't start training. The dog's going to be living with me and we're going to spend time together doing nothing. And that's it. Because after 2 or 3 or 4 days, whatever it takes, eventually when that dog sees me, instead of being a little tense or stressed, now on day 3 or 4, the dog's happy to see me because he
Right.
knows I'm taking the dog out. Now he gets to go outside and run around. He gets to go
Right.
pee and poop. He gets to drink water. I'm going to give him food. I'm going to even play with him a little bit, you know?
Right.
But the
Right.
average dog owner, and that's where we fail with the millions of dogs all over the world, the average dog owner doesn't understand any of this. And I think as professional dog trainers, we are failing the general public by teaching them the simplicity of living with your dog properly. I really do. I think that's where so many dogs are being failed and being put to sleep and being put in shelters.
Right. True. That's true. That's true. So, that actually, all the points you've shared in terms of, you know, ever since we started off with the live session, it's been really insightful, and I'm sure it would be helping a lot of dog owners also. All the viewers that are seeing who are just a regular pet parent, all the tips would be extremely helpful and beneficial. You've put it so simply that even if someone has not too much or extensive sort of knowledge in
Sure.
terms of how to raise a dog, it's going to be very in the best simplified way possible. So what I think we're more or less we've covered all the topics for today, and we would with the kind of knowledge you have, and especially the way you explain, we would actually I would love to host you again for a couple of more live sessions for various other topics, so that you
Sure.
can share all of your knowledge further with us. And it was really nice and really really great hosting you. For all the people who viewing, who saw the live session today, if at all you would want to connect with Larry, for further any sort of assistance or questions, or any dog, any issue that you're facing with your own dog or your puppy, you can reach out to him on his Facebook or Instagram page. I've shared with you the link here below. And I think we're good to go. We have, let me just go through if at all we've missed out on any questions over here. No, I think we're good to go. And again, Kat, as usual, she's agreeing to what I said. That brilliant explanation by
Thanks,
you. You
Kat.
must teach a dog boundaries and respect as you would to a child.
Sure.
So thank you so much, Larry, for being a part of today's live session. And it was great hosting you. And I really look forward to host you again. And special, thank you to Dog Spot who actually has this started off, started utilizing the lockdown time and this, pandemic sort of time by releasing as many informative, dog training related or behavior related or health related videos as much as possible. So thank you to DogSpot for, having both of us on board. We're Yeah, we have just one more message by Mandy saying you two made my morning better. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mandy,
Thank
for
you,
joining and
Mandy.
tuning in.
Thank you
So
so
thank you so
much.
much, Larry. It was great hosting you. I look forward to host a couple of more sessions with you. And thank you all the viewers for joining in. If at all you feel that, today's session was useful, and if at all you know someone who might be needing to see this to be able to understand how to, handle their and deal with their dogs and raise their dogs the right way, to read their dogs the right way, please, share out this video with them and share it as much as possible. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Larry. Thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity very much. Truly honored. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.